Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I'll be showing you how to create this animation using both Adobe Animate and After Effects.
Hey, I'm Mush, your friendly mushroom. So, I had a wild day. I was just chilling when out of nowhere, this squirrel zooms past and knocks me over. I was like, really? Of all the places to run? I stood up, dusted myself off, and thought, no big deal. Stay calm. But then, the same squirrel came back with an acorn, and it dropped it right on my head. Ouch, I couldn't believe it. But instead of getting mad, I just shrugged, thought, well, at least I'm part of the food chain.
So this series will be two parts. Part 1, we'll be using Adobe Animate to do some lip syncing and character pose changes and eye changes. And then in After Effects, we're gonna add some nice squash and stretch transitions between our poses while also adding some background and lighting and also some prop animation. So here I have my Illustrator file with all of the different poses, different mouth shapes, visemes, eyes, and effects. So first I have some shadow, and then I have different poses. I believe I have 14 poses. Then different effects. I have 3 different effects. Then I have some different eye shapes and different mouth shapes along with the visemes. So you want to make sure to put each of them in a separate layer and label them correctly. And again, this is to better illustrate it. I have different poses, different mouths, different eye shapes, and different effects to create all sorts of different emotions. Alright, now let's jump into Adobe Animate. Let's create a full HD project. And let's make sure all have the same workspace. So go to Window, Workspaces, and select Basic. And now let's go to Window, Workspaces again, and reset Basic. So we all have the same workspace. Press yes. Now let's import our Illustrator files into Adobe Animate. Go to File, Import, and then Import to Stage. Command R. And let's navigate to our AI file. So click on it and then click Open. And you can leave the default settings in here. You can select your artboard from here and then use the same settings as me. And you can turn off any layer you don't want. So you can turn off maybe the shadow layer if you don't want it. And then also convert to animate layers and then click import. So here we have all of our layers. So we want to separate them into different symbols, which will make our lives easier. So first, let's put all of the different poses into one symbol. So what you're gonna do is select the first pose. Let's zoom in. Select the first pose. Select the first pose layer. So click on the pose 14 layer, then scroll up till you find the last pose, and while holding shift, click. So hold shift and click to select all of the poses, and then we're gonna cut them. So hover your mouse over the keyframes, these circles right here. Then let's do right click and cut frames. And now we can delete them. All right, now let's go to Insert, a new symbol, and let's type our name in here. So I'm gonna name it Poses Symbol 1, and make sure the type is set to graphic. All right, graphic, and press OK. And here, let's paste our frames. So go to the first frame and click Paste Frames. And what we're gonna do is drag each of them in a separate time frame. So click and drag each keyframe into a separate time, which basically will look like some stairs. And then after we're done, we want to create an empty layer. So click a new layer. Let's rename it to empty. And click on the last keyframe right here. Okay, not here, on here, the last one. And we're gonna create an empty frame. So click Insert Keyframe, the square with the circle inside it. So Insert Keyframe, which will create an empty keyframe for us just in case we don't want to show any poses. So it's good practice to always create an empty frame in your symbols. Let's go back to scene 1. Alright, let's make a new layer for the different poses. So let's make a new layer and name it Poses Layer. Okay. And let's go to Library and insert our poses symbol into the layer. Okay, so click and drag in anywhere in the frame. And let's use this free transform tool to transform our symbol into where we see fit. And you can use the arrow keys to move your symbol. And now we're gonna do the same process for all of the mouths. So click on the first mouth, scroll up, and select the last mouth. And what we're gonna do is hover over the keyframes, right click, and cut frames. Now we can delete the layers. Since we don't need them anymore, go to Insert, a new symbol, and let's call it Mouse Symbol. And again, make sure the type is set to graphic. Press OK. And on the hovering over the first keyframe, right click and let's paste frames. And again, we're just going to do the same process, move each of the layers in a different time frame. And lastly, let's create an empty layer. All right, and click on the last layer and insert keyframe. And again, after that, you want to go back and create a new layer and name it to mouse layer and drag and drop your mouse symbol inside it. Let's do the same thing for the eyes. Click on the first eye, scroll up all the way to the last eye, hold shift and click, and then let's do cut frames. All right, right click and cut frames. Let's delete them. Make a new layer and name it Eyes Layer. Go to Insert, a new symbol, and let's name it to Eyes Symbol. Make sure it's graphic type again and click OK. Right click on the first frame and then paste frames. And again, create an empty layer, call it empty, and insert a keyframe on the last time frame. So click the last time frame and click insert keyframe. Alright, let's go back and insert our eye symbol into the eyes layer. So go to library and click and drag the eyes symbol into the character. And you can use your arrow keys to position it. Okay, let's do the same thing for the effects. Select all of the effects. Then let's do right click, cut frames, and delete them. Then let's make a new layer called effects layer. Insert a new symbol, effects symbol, press OK, and then paste frames, and again position them each in a different time frame, and also create an empty keyframe as well. Alright, let's go back and insert our effects symbol into the effects layer. Alright, so you should have something like this. We have the shadow, the poses layer, the mouth layer, the eyes layer, the effects layer, and now we're going to add the audio layer. So click a new layer. I'll rename it to audio layer. And then now what you're gonna do is move to your last keyframe that you can. So 530, so click and drag to select the last keyframes and click insert frame. So you want to make sure it's this one and not the other ones. Alright, because we want a continuous keyframe. Okay, then again go to the last keyframe that you can. Click and drag to select all of these keyframes and then click insert frame. Let's do it one more time. Click and drag on the last layers and then let's click insert frame. Alright, let's go back to the first frame. And now we're going to drag and drop our audio layer. So click on the first frame of the audio layer. So the audio will start from frame 1. Navigate to your audio file and drag and drop in anywhere in the frame. You will see a plus icon. Alright, now we have our audio in Adobe Animate. If we can't hear your audio, what we're gonna do is click on your audio layer, then go to properties and then frame. So properties, frame, and change the sync to stream. Alright, and one more thing is go to file, publish settings. Alright, so file, publish settings, and change the audio stream. Instead of MP3, use RAW. Press OK. And we're gonna do the same thing for audio event. On compression, change it from MP3 to RAW. Click OK. This will give us the best audio quality for export. Alright, let's click on our poses layer, go to properties, object. And now we have different looping options. The first looping option is to play graphic in a loop, which will continuously play all of the different frames in a loop. The second option is play graphic once, which will basically go through all the different poses and then disappear like this. The third option is what we want, which is to play single frame for the graphic, which will only play the selected frame. So the pause doesn't change. And then the fourth one is to play graphic reverse once, So it will play the frames in reverse and then hold on the last frame. And then the fifth one is to play graphic in reverse loop. So it's basically like the first one, but will be in reverse this time. Alright, so we're going to choose the middle one, which is play single frame. Click on it and make sure you own the first frame before you click on it. Alright, make sure you're on the first frame. If you go to a different frame and then select a different looping option, so you can see here, let's select this. Notice how it will create a keyframe for us. Okay, so make sure you own the frame you would like to change. So as you can see, it will hold and then play in a loop. So I'm gonna do Command Z and then go to the first frame and choose the middle option, which is to play graphic once. So here we have the frame picker. We can choose any different pose we would like. You can cycle through the different poses and it will change the keyframe pose. And we also have our empty pose. So notice how if I go to a different time frame, if I move the cursor to a different time and then click on our poses layer and select a different pose, it will create a keyframe for me. Alright, automatically. And now I have this pose, and then maybe I can select a different pose, this one, and see it will automatically create a keyframe for me. So it's very important where you have your cursor. So I have this pose first, and then it changes to this one, and then it changes to this one. So I'm gonna do Command Z, go to the first frame, and select the appropriate pose. But first, let's dock our frame picker to the top so it's easier to access. Let's click and drag it here. Right, now it looks cleaner. So before I start animating, let's click on our mouse layer, go to Properties, Object, and do the same thing. Play single frame for the graphic. Click on the eyes layer, go to Properties, Object, and again in looping options, choose the play single frame for graphic, which is the middle one, and do the same thing for effects. Properties, Object, and select the middle option for looping. Before we start animating, let's do some lip syncing. So click on your mouth layer, go to Object, and then lip syncing. Choose your audio layer from here. We're going to select audio layer, and then we're going to choose the correct voice themes for each sound so we can have some lip syncing action going on. So make sure your voice themes look like this. Press done, and Adobe Animate will automatically lip sync our mouths.
Hey, I'm Mush, your friendly mushroom. So,
Alright, now comes the fun part, which will be to use different poses, eyes, and effects depending on the sound. So our first frame, make sure you go to the frame picker tab, which we have in here. Again, a single frame, and If you click it, it will automatically create a keyframe for you. So the first frame will be introductory. So let's see which pose fits. So I think this pose will fit.
Hey,
And now we can change it to a different pose. So click on your poses layer. Alright, and a good place to change the pose will be after the neutral lip sync. So when he opens his mouth will be a good point to change the pose. So let's maybe choose this one.
hey, I'm Mush.
Alright, now we can do the same thing for the eyes. Click on the eyes and select a different eye shape. And also choose a different effect. Alright, so I'm gonna change the effect to empty. So click on the first frame of the effect and let's use the empty layer. And you're basically gonna do the same thing, change the pose, the eyes, the effect, depending on the story or your sound audio. And you're gonna do it until you're happy with your animation.
Hey, I'm Mush, your friendly mushroom. So, I had a wild day. I was just chilling when out of nowhere, this squirrel zooms past and knocks me over. I was like, really? Of all the places to run? I stood up, dusted myself off, and thought, no big deal. Stay calm. But then, the same squirrel came back with an acorn, and it dropped it right on my head. Ouch, I couldn't believe it. But instead of getting mad, I just shrugged, thought, well, at least I'm part of the food chain.
Okay, so now before we import into After Effects, we want to hide the shadow layer because After Effects and Adobe Animate don't work well together with blending modes and different opacities. So let's hide the shadow layer and right click and then click guide to completely hide the shadow layer. And if you do that, let's do that again, hide and right click and click guide, and you'll notice it will change the icon. That means it won't be exported. And if you want to bring it back, you can just click guide again to uncheck it. Okay, let's click file, export, and then export movie. So you want to make sure you click export export movie. Let's click on it. And you want to make sure in the file format to choose a SWF file, which is basically a vector animation that we will import into After Effects. Let's call it Mush Animation and click Save. And you'll notice it exported really quickly because it's a SWF file. Alright, let's jump into After Effects and create a new project. And let's make sure we're all on the same workspace. So let's go to Window, Workspace, and select Effects. And then again, Window, Workspace, and Reset Effects to saved layout. So we can all have the same workspace. Let's select the project panel and then drag and drop our assets into After Effects. Import this SWF file, which we can see it's working correctly. Let's also import the audio file because Swift files don't have audio in After Effects. Let's create a new composition. 1920 by 1080, 24 frames per second, and we're gonna just call it Animation Comp 1. Press OK. Click and drag our Swift file inside the composition and also the audio file.
Hey, I'm Mush, your friendly mushroom. So, I had a wild day.
Okay, so it seems to be working correctly. Notice how if we scale it, it's blurry. To fix that, all you need to do is just click on the vector box right here to let After Effects know this is an animated vector file. And now you can see we have sharp details. We can scale it to however we like without affecting the quality. Now I'm going to import my props into After Effects. So I have the forest background and I also have the acorn prop. So what I'm gonna do is just click and drag the AI file for the environment. Import kind, choose composition, and footage dimensions, use layer size, press OK. And you'll get this folder that contains all of your Illustrator files. Then now we can just drag and drop the forest background below our character and also the acorn above our character. Let's scale the background up, so make sure you're on the selection tool, hold shift and scale up your background layer. And again, make sure to enable the vector box in After Effects for all the Illustrator vector files. Let's scale up the acorn a little bit and leave it outside the frame for now. Let's position our character where we would like in our background. Hold shift and scale down to scale proportionally. Maybe I would like him to be here. And don't worry if he looks small right now, we're gonna add a camera later to zoom in. So in each layer in After Effects, we have different transform options. So by clicking this arrow and clicking the transform arrow, we have anchor point, position, scale, rotation, and opacity. And each of these have a shortcut, so it's really handy to learn the shortcut of these. So if you press P, the position will show up. If you press S, the scale option will show up. Okay, and you can turn off this constraint to scale unproportionally. Okay, and then you can press R for rotation. Okay, and you can press R again to hide the rotation. So it's super handy to learn these shortcuts. And we have T for opacity. Alright, so P for position, S for scale, R for rotation, and T for opacity. Alright. Alright, now let's create a new camera. So go to Layer, New Camera. Make sure the type is set to one node camera, which is best used for 2D animations. Press OK. And now we have our camera. So press P to bring up the position. And if I change it, nothing happens. Why is that? Because our layers are not 3D. So click on the toggle switches mode to bring up this mode and check all the 3D boxes on the layers. Alright. Now let's also enable motion blur. So you can click and drag on the layers motion blur box to enable it for all of them. And now, as you can see, the camera is working probably with the layers. So let's go to maybe 1 second. And let's click on the stopwatch to create a keyframe. So you only need to do that in the beginning. And then afterwards, if you try to change the value, After Effects will automatically create a keyframe for you. You don't need to click the stopwatch again. So I'm gonna zoom in by using the Z value. So again, we have X, Y, and Z. So the first value is X, which is gonna move the camera left and right. Then we have Y, which will move the camera up and down. And we have Z, which zooms in and zooms out. So we have a keyframe in 1 second. Let's go to 1.5 seconds and zoom in using the Z value. And then make sure you selected fit, so you have the correct proportions, and you can adjust the X and Y and Z to zoom in and center your character in frame. Alright, now we have 2 keyframes, so that's all you need to do to zoom in.
I'm Mush, your friendly mushroom. So, I had a wild day. I was just chilling.
And if you want to make this faster, all you need to do is just bring the keyframes closer to each other,
I'm Mush, your friendly mushroom.
which will give you a faster zoom. And if you want it slower, do the opposite.
I'm Mush, your friendly mushroom. I'm Mush, your friendly mushroom.
Alright, so now if the only thing left to do is to add a transition between the different poses in our animation. So right now it just cuts to the next pose, as you can see here. So we're gonna add a squash and stretch animation when the pose change happens. But before that, let's add markers to each new pose we see before we add our keyframes. So go to Layer, Markers, and Add Marker. Or you can do Control 8 to add a marker. Let's click on it, and you will see it created a marker for us, so we know where the pose change happens. And if you hold Shift and move the cursor will snap to the nearest marker. Alright, let's move to the next pose change. So I see a new pose here. So go to the new pose and do Control 8. Alright, and you can hold the Shift button and the mouse scroll wheel to move horizontally in the timeline, and then we can move the cursor to the next pose change. And you can also do command or control left arrow to go to the previous frame, or control right arrow to go to the next frame for more precise markers. Okay. Alright, so after you're done, you should have a markup for each new pose change. So it will help us visualize where the new poses happen. Okay, so let's zoom in, and now we're gonna add a squash and stretch animation whenever a new pose happens. So instead of putting keyframes on our mush character, we're gonna use a null object instead. So go to layer, new, null object, which will basically keep our character clean from any keyframes. So let's rename it to mush null. Alright, so first of all, let's turn it into a 3D. Right now it's 2D, so we're gonna go down and click the 3D box to enable the 3D object. So click on our null and then make sure 3D is enabled. And now let's move it down somewhere between Mush's feet. So the placement of this is very important. It's basically like the anchor point where you want your character to scale from and scale down from. So I'm gonna position it here. Now we're gonna parent mush to the null object, which is easy to do. So we parented the shadow to mush. Now we're going to parent mush to the mush null object. So click and drag on the parent pick whip and select the mush null. Alright, which will basically act like a controller for our character. Now if we go to the transform options, if we try to change any of these, it will control our character. And let's say if you don't like if you don't want to use it anymore, you can just unparent it. So I want to add a squash and stretch animation between the two keyframes. So on scale, I'm going to turn off the constraint proportions so I can scale it only in one axis. So let's click on the stopwatch to create a keyframe, and then you're gonna go to the next frame. So press Control right arrow to go to the next frame and then add a new keyframe. So we're gonna add 6 keyframes of the same scale. Alright, so 3 keyframes on the new pose and also 3 keyframes on the older pose. Alright, so what we're gonna do here is basically make the character squash and stretch to use as a transition for our pose changes. So the first frame and the last frame will be normal scales, and then the second frame and the second last frame will be squashed, and the middle frames will be stretched. Alright, so we're gonna leave the first frame the same, so it's gonna be normal. The second frame will be squashed, so we're gonna adjust the X width to 110. We're adding 10 to it, so we want to subtract 10 from the Y. So I'm gonna write 90. So if you add 10 to X, you want to subtract 10 from Y. so everything is proportionate. Okay. Let's go to the third frame, which will be stretched. So here's gonna be, the width is gonna be 90, and in the y-axis is gonna be 110. So we're subtracting 10, we're gonna add 10 to the y. Here's gonna be the same, 90 and 110. To add a stretch effect, now we're gonna do squash again, so 110 and 90. So now we have a nice transition with some motion blur. Alright, let's select all of our 6 frames. Let's do Command C to copy. Go to our next, pause, change, hold shift and the mouse wheel to scroll down the timeline, and then stop at your next marker, and let's do Command V or Control V to paste, and let's move the keyframes. So we have 3 keyframes at our old pose and 3 keyframes at our new pose. Alright, that looks fine. Let's move to the next pose. And basically, let's do the same thing for all of the poses.
Hey, I'm Mush, your friendly mushroom. So, I had a wild day. I was just chilling when out of nowhere, this squirrel zooms past and knocks me over. I was like, really? Of all the places to run? I stood up, dusted myself off, and thought, no big deal. Stay calm. But then, the same squirrel came back with an acorn, and it dropped it right on my head. Ouch, I couldn't believe it. But instead of getting mad, I just shrugged. Thought, well, at least I'm part of the food chain.
Okay, so that was our squash and stretch animation. Now we're gonna add some extra animation to the acorn. So let's go here.
And it dropped it right on my head. Ouch, I couldn't believe it.
Okay, so when he says ouch, I want to drop the acorn on his head. So let's go to our acorn prop layer right here. Make sure it's visible. Alright, let's zoom out to see where it is. Make sure you have the selection tool or press V to go to the selection tool, and let's see, let's bring down our acorn. Let's make it smaller. And let's position it on his head right here. And then I'm gonna make a keyframe at the position. So we have one keyframe at his head. And what I'm gonna do is press U, so it will only show the transform options that have keyframes in them. Then I'm gonna go back in time, like here, and then I'm gonna move the acorn up. So you have one keyframe at his head and one keyframe at the top of the frame. And we can bring it closer to make it time better. And then the third keyframe is going to be outside the frame, because I want it to like bounce on his head and then jump out. Okay, so now I'm going to click and drag these small circles you see here. Okay, do you see these small circles? If you click and drag them, you can create like a curve to better position your animation. So I wanted to go this path, so like hit his head and then bounce up outside the frame. And you can play around and experiment with the position animation until you find the right timing that fits the scene. At the end, I had something like this.
On my head. Ouch, I couldn't believe it. But instead of getting mad, I just shrugged. Thought?
Okay, so now I'm going to add some animation when he meditates in the air. So first, let's choose a different parenting for the shadow. I'm going to change the parent to mush null, and then go to my meditation pose change, and go to our mush character, and let's insert a keyframe for the position, like this. Click the stopwatch, then scroll down to where the meditation animation ends, so it ends right here, and then I'm gonna click another keyframe which is gonna be the same position. Now let's go to the middle and add a third keyframe of him up in the air like this. Now if you look at our animation, he goes up in the air and then comes back. And I can add some keyframe assistance, ease assistance to make it smoother.
Stay calm. But then, this...
Alright, that looks good.
No big deal. Stay calm. But then...
Now I'm just gonna render my video. So go to the last frame you would like to render and press N. Then go to File, Export, and add to render queue. Click here to select where you would like to save it. I'm gonna save it in this folder. And name it Mush Animation. Click Save and press Render.
Hey, I'm Mush, your friendly mushroom. So, I had a wild day. I was just chilling when out of nowhere, this squirrel zooms past and knocks me over. I was like, really? Of all the places to run? I stood up, dusted myself off, and thought, no big deal. Stay calm. But then, the same squirrel came back with an acorn, and it dropped it right on my head. Ouch, I couldn't believe it. But instead of getting mad, I just shrugged. Thought, well, at least I'm part of the food chain.
Let's create a new project in Premiere Pro. Click Create. Let's go to Window, Workspace Editing, and then Window, Workspace Reset to Saved Layout. Let's drag and drop our video animation and also all the sound and music effects. Alright, let's right click on our video and then let's do new sequence from clip. And now we're just gonna add all of our music and sound effects. Then let's go to File, Export Media, and let's do H.264 format and adaptive high bitrate. Select where you would like to save it and press Export. And that's it. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!
Hey, I'm Mush, your friendly mushroom. So, I had a wild day. I was just chilling when out of nowhere, this squirrel zooms past and knocks me over. I was like, really? Of all the places to run? I stood up, dusted myself off, and thought, no big deal. Stay calm. But then, the same squirrel came back with an acorn, and it dropped it right on my head. Ouch, I couldn't believe it. But instead of getting mad, I just shrugged, thought, well, at least I'm part of the food chain.